On November 3, 2020 at 10:06 a.m., a delivery was made to a house in Bristol, England. Concealed in a plastic shopping bag were 4 tightly packed kilos of cocaine, worth about £400,000. Unknown to them, this would become the lead that would bring down a €7 million drug cartel. During the early hours of the next day in a quiet home in Swindon, England, a phone buzzed. The message was urgent: they know, run now. But it came too late. Armed officers had already surrounded the property. Inside, Warren Allison, husband, father and self-proclaimed businessman, lay sleeping beside his wife, unaware that his double life was moments away from unraveling. Beneath the bed, £300,000 in cash. Parked outside, a Lamborghini bought with drug money. This would mark the beginning of the end for one of Britain's most sophisticated drug networks. Over the course of 4 years, Warren and his older brother Calroy operated a covert empire built on encrypted phones, coded messages and trusted couriers. They trafficked over 70 kilograms of high-purity cocaine across the southwest, all while hiding in plain sight. But what brought down their network wasn't a shootout or betrayal. It was a single delivery, made 1 minute too late, that opened the door to a police investigation stretching from Wiltshire to Albania. This is the true story of how 2 brothers built a £7 million cocaine cartel, and how their final mistake brought it all crashing down. In 2016, Wiltshire looked like any other quiet corner of southern England. Rolling fields, peaceful streets, lives unfolding at a predictable pace. But beneath all that calm, something was starting to shift, and at the center of it were 2 brothers. Warren Allison was 32. Charismatic, sharp, impatient. He hated waiting, for opportunities, for money, for respect. His older brother Calroy, more reserved but equally calculating, followed close behind. They didn't come from money and they weren't born into crime. But they knew one thing: playing by the rules would never get them what they wanted. At first it was basic: local deals, small amounts, cash-in-hand transactions that barely made a dent. But even in those early days, Warren moved differently. He didn't see himself as a street dealer. He saw himself as a connector. Someone who could organize, distribute, and scale. And that's when the whispers started. Through contacts, favors, and a network that most people never noticed, the Allisons were introduced to something much bigger. A door into a world they'd only heard about. Albanian crime syndicates. Men who spoke in code, moved in silence, and controlled a supply chain that stretched from the ports of Europe to the streets of Britain. The deal was simple: the Albanians had the cocaine. The brothers would move it, fast, quiet, and in bulk. No more street scraps. This was wholesale. Efficient. Profitable. Warren didn't hesitate. They didn't just agree to work with them. They built a system around them. A structure that, if done right, could never be traced. No names. No faces. Just messages, movement, and money. And for a while it worked. But what started as a business partnership would soon grow into something far more dangerous, and far harder to control. Because the brothers weren't just building a network. They were building an empire. And it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. Once the Allison brothers made their first connection to Albania's cocaine pipeline, everything changed. The days of street deals were over. This was a business now, a machine. And they were building it brick by brick. Their strategy was simple: buy in bulk, break it down, and move fast. The product came in heavy, 10 to 30 kilo shipments of high-purity cocaine, and left in smaller, more manageable batches. They didn't waste time chasing small profits. They focused on volume, efficiency, and staying hidden. But moving that much weight came with risk. So the brothers made sure their communication was locked down. They switched to military-grade encrypted platforms, EncroChat and SkyECC, devices so secure entire crime networks were built around them. On the surface, their messages looked harmless. Conversations about designer clothes, or tickets. But every word had meaning. Clothes meant cocaine. Tickets meant cash. And behind every message was a carefully coordinated move. They needed people they could trust, people who wouldn't ask questions. Richard Cowell was one of them. He was 57, quiet, reliable, and invisible in a crowd. Perfect. The brothers gave him a specially modified vehicle with hidden compartments, so sophisticated that even trained officers wouldn't spot them. Cowell became their courier, their go-between, their runner. And not just for them. At one point he was moving drugs and money for multiple crews, like a personal Uber for organized crime. The money moved fast and it moved in bulk. Managing it became a job of its own. That's where Portia Densley came in, Warren's partner, and the group's unofficial finance manager. She was the one collecting payments, counting stacks, and making sure the cash kept flowing. Quiet, loyal, and calculated, Portia helped turn drug money into assets. Clean on paper. Untraceable in real life. They didn't just hide the money. They flaunted it. Warren bought a Lamborghini Huracan. Then a Mercedes C63 AMG. Then an Audi RS6. All paid in cash. It wasn't just about getting rich, it was about showing that they had won. That they had built something powerful. And for a while it worked. The system ran like a machine. Silent. Profitable. Untouchable. But no network survives expansion without risk. And by 2019 the cracks were starting to show. By the way, if you have enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like and share this video as it will encourage us to create more videos on UK organized crime. By 2019, the Allison brothers weren't just operating in Wiltshire anymore. The network had outgrown its hometown. Their supply lines now stretched deep into Bristol and were creeping steadily into London, two cities with bigger markets, higher demand, and much higher risks. To manage the new territory, Warren promoted someone he trusted, Anthony Burke, their cousin. Anthony wasn't flashy. He blended in. The kind of person who could move serious weight without raising alarms. In Bristol, he became the point man for deliveries, handling thousands of pounds worth of cocaine with nothing more than a nod and a phone call. But as the network grew, so did the need for more moving parts. More couriers. More drop locations. More encrypted phones. Every deal meant more risk. More messages flying through EncroChat, more cars running routes, more people holding secrets. And with that growth came something more dangerous than ambition: arrogance. The brothers had become untouchable in their own minds. Warren was flaunting cash with zero hesitation, expensive watches, designer clothes, and those luxury cars bought in full. A Lamborghini Huracan, an Audi RS6, a Mercedes C63, all paid for in crisp notes. The lifestyle became louder. The messages sloppier. The system that once moved like a ghost started leaving footprints. They thought they were too smart to get caught. Too connected. Too careful. But the more people you bring in, the harder it is to control them all. And one of those people, one of those loose ends, was about to lead the police directly to their door. It wasn't a dramatic shootout. It wasn't an inside betrayal. The first crack in the Allison empire came from something far simpler: a nosy neighbor. People in Wiltshire started noticing things that didn't make sense. A man with no known business driving a brand new Lamborghini Huracan. Strange cars showing up at odd hours. Packages exchanged quickly. Conversations that stopped when anyone got too close. One resident described it as money moving like water. It wasn't long before that chatter made its way to the right person. Detective Constable Matthew Harvey, part of Wiltshire Police's serious and organized crime unit, took the tip seriously. Something about it felt off, too organized, too clean. He began digging. Surveillance teams were assigned. Phone records were pulled. Bank activity started being mapped. And what he found was the outline of something far bigger than anyone expected. Then, something no one could have predicted happened. June 2020, French authorities compromised EncroChat, the same encrypted messaging platform used by the Allison network. Thousands of criminal operations across Europe were exposed overnight. The back door was open. And inside that digital vault, Harvey and his team found exactly what they were looking for. They traced usernames. Warren Allison was legal master. Richard Cowell, South Kangaroo. The chats weren't just damning, they were detailed. Dates, amounts, drop points, coded language about clothes and tickets. For the first time, investigators could see the network's inner workings laid out in full. But even with all this digital evidence, they still didn't have a clear way to tie the messages to a physical handoff. They needed something solid. Something undeniable. And then, it happened. November 3, 2020. Bristol. The surveillance team was already in place. Cameras rolling. Radios silent. They'd been following the movement for days, tracking calls, mapping routes, watching the pattern repeat over and over. But this time something was different. This time they were ready. The package was small. Just one Tesco bag for life. But what it carried wasn't groceries, it was 4 kilos of high-purity cocaine, worth nearly £500,000. Anthony Burke, Warren and Kelroy's cousin, stepped out to receive the bag. No panic. No hesitation. Just a quiet exchange on a quiet street. He took it upstairs like it was nothing. He had no idea the walls were closing in. The moment he crossed the threshold, the signal was given. Police stormed the flat. Burke was arrested before he could blink. The bag was opened. Inside, 4 tightly packed bricks of cocaine wrapped and sealed. This wasn't just another bust. It was the final piece. The real-world link between the encrypted messages, the money, the players, and now the product. Within hours, the signal went out. Raids were triggered across Wiltshire, Bristol, and London. Every target had been marked. Every name matched. The operation that had taken years to build was about to be dismantled in a single morning. And as dawn broke, the empire collapsed, one arrest at a time. November 4, 2020. Just after 6 a.m. The silence didn't last long. Across Wiltshire, Bristol, and London, armed officers executed a series of coordinated raids. After months of surveillance, everything was now in motion. The Allison cartel was being dismantled in real time. In Swindon, police entered the home of Warren Allison. They found him asleep, unaware that the trap had already closed. Beneath his bed, £300,000 in stacked cash. His Lamborghini Huracan sat in the driveway, still warm from the night before. By sunrise, Warren was in handcuffs. Not far away in Hilperton, his older brother Kelroy Allison was arrested. Calm, cold, silent. Elsewhere, the net pulled tighter. Richard Cowell, the trusted courier, was arrested with the same quiet efficiency. His custom-built vehicle, with hidden compartments built into its frame, was seized on the spot. Portia Densley, Warren's romantic partner and financial coordinator, was taken in without resistance. 4 years she had helped disguise dirty money as clean income, moving cash across borders and bank accounts like it was nothing. And then there was Anthony Burke, the cousin. His arrest came just 24 hours after the fateful handoff in Bristol, the moment that brought the entire network crashing down. But the operation reached further than British soil. Ledian Hodja and Jeter Pisha, the Albanian suppliers, had already fled the country. They believed they were safe. They weren't. Interpol red notices were issued. European arrest warrants followed. And soon after, both men were captured abroad and extradited back to the UK. Then came the final arrest. Enid Aliko, 28. She didn't handle drugs. She didn't move cash. But she supplied the encrypted Sky ECC devices that powered the network's communication, even after the first arrests. She kept the lines open long after the foundation had started to crack. She was taken into custody before she could disappear too. In just 2 days, the Allison operation was no longer a mystery. It was a case. With names, numbers, evidence, and now faces behind bars. But even with the arrests made and the walls closing in, the brothers still believed they could beat it. The messages were coded. The phones were encrypted. The evidence they thought was just smoke. They were wrong. Because what waited for them in the courtroom wasn't a theory. It was proof. And it would leave no room for escape. Winchester Crown Court. Winter 2024. By the time the trial began, the empire was already in ruins. But what unfolded in court wasn't about what they built, it was about what could be proven. For 12 straight weeks, the prosecution laid it bare. Encrypted messages, surveillance footage, financial records. Each piece stacked on the next like bricks in a wall. The evidence didn't argue, it exposed. They read out messages from EncroChat and Sky ECC. Code words like designer clothes and tickets suddenly took on chilling meaning. Warren Allison's handle? Legal master. Richard Cowell? South Kangaroo. Every message was linked to a real-world drop, a courier run, a cash count. Still, the defense clung to a shaky claim, they were just selling fake clothes. But that story shattered fast. Chemical tests confirmed the drugs. Bank statements tracked the money trail. Chat logs and surveillance tied every name to the operation like clockwork. The jury didn't take long. All 8 were found guilty. The room was silent. No more encrypted phones. No more street codes. Just faces, charges, and a legacy built on greed. And now the court would decide what this criminal empire was really worth. On February 6, 2025, inside Winchester Crown Court, the final chapter of the Allison empire unfolded. Warren Allison, the architect of it all, was handed 23 years. His kingdom reduced to cold walls and numbered days. Kelroy Allison, once the quiet strategist, got 16.5 years. Richard Cowell, the courier who carried secrets beneath his car floor, was sentenced to 9 years. Portia Densley, the so-called finance manager who turned dirty cash into luxury, received 8 years. Anthony Burke, the cousin whose careless handoff cracked the entire case, also got 8 years. The Albanian suppliers, Ledian Hodja and Jeter Pisha, received 7 years and 4 months and 6 years and 8 months respectively. Enid Aliko, the youngest of them all, got 4 years for keeping the encrypted lines alive. In total, 82 years behind bars. Every car, every home, every account, seized or frozen. Financial recovery teams are still digging, still tracing the web they left behind. But even as the cell doors slammed shut, one truth lingered in the air. This empire may have fallen, but others are still watching, still building, still learning from the Allisons' mistakes. The Allisons believed they were untouchable. For years they moved like shadows, quiet, calculated, invisible to most. They mastered the art of silence. They built a structure so tight it looked foolproof. They trusted encrypted phones more than people. And for a while it worked. But what they forgot, what every empire forgets, is that nothing stays hidden forever. Every pound of cocaine, every coded message, every cash-stuffed car boot, it all leaves a trace. The arrogance that once fueled their rise became the very crack that let the light in. This isn't just the story of a £7 million empire crashing down. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous networks aren't made up of masterminds in foreign countries. They're built by neighbors, cousins, partners, people who look like they're just living regular lives. And no matter how careful you are, all it takes is 1 minute, one mistake, one Tesco bag, for everything to fall apart. Remember, sometimes it isn't the police or the government that sees the cracks first. It's the neighbor who wonders why a quiet street suddenly has luxury cars parked outside. It's the shopkeeper who notices the same man visiting at odd hours. It's the community that watches, silently, but feels that something's off. And in this case, it was those quiet observations that helped bring down a multi-million-pound drug empire. So if you see something unusual, don't ignore it. Say something. Report it. Because your tip, your instinct, your voice, might be the one thing that brings the next empire to its knees. If this story was valuable to you, don't forget to like and subscribe to Vault Crime for more underworld crime stories like this. See you in our next upload. August 2018. 2 vehicles heading north on the M6. One of them carried nearly 200 kilos of pure cocaine, packed tight beneath a false floor in the back of a van. When police shut down the motorway near Knutsford and boxed them in, it sparked headlines across the country. The drugs were worth over £20 million. It was the largest land-based cocaine seizure in British history. But that wasn't the start of the story. The real collapse began weeks earlier, quietly, in a rented living room in Warrington. The camera was recording. 2 men were laughing. Bundles of cash were laid across the table like poker chips. Over £150,000 in notes. Rolex watches. A money-counting machine buzzing in the background. It was supposed to be private. But what that single video exposed wasn't just arrogance. It revealed the map to an empire. A network that stretched from Merseyside to London. 3 interconnected crews, each running their own operation but all feeding the same pipeline. The dealers, the transporters, the suppliers. And at the center of it all, a man nicknamed Alvin. He didn't need a gun to control a city. Just a phone, a car, and a promise. But that promise was built on credit. And by the time the drugs hit the road, he owed the wrong people millions. So how did one careless moment pull the curtain back on an empire that thought it was invisible? And why did that video matter more than any phone tap, any raid, or any wire? To understand that, we have to go back to where it all began. And what was really hiding behind the tinted windows and showroom smiles in Warrington. Before his name was whispered in courtrooms and encoded in encrypted chats, Jamie Oldroyd was just a young guy from Warrington with slick hair, sharp trainers, and a taste for speed. To most people who saw him on the street, he looked like the type who sold cars, not cocaine. And that was exactly the plan. He registered a business, Pro Lease Vehicle Hire, a polished front offering luxury cars to footballers, influencers, and weekend show-offs. His paperwork looked clean. His Instagram? Even cleaner. But behind the smile and spotless Otis, Jamie was building something bigger. Much bigger. By the time police even knew his name, he was already operating more than 17 different vehicles. Not as a fleet, but as moving pieces in a drug network that stretched from Manchester to London, Carlisle to Darlington. Each car had a purpose. Some were stash rides. Others were clean lookouts. A few were just decoys. All of them in some way were part of a growing web of movement, exchange, and secrecy. He didn't handle the drugs directly. That would have made him too easy to trace. Instead, he built layers, couriers, safehouse runners, pickup teams. A multi-tier setup that allowed him to stay above the risk while keeping his hands on the controls. Oldroyd understood one thing well. In this business, perception is protection. And for a while it worked. To the world he was a businessman. To his crew he was the boss. But beneath the polish the pressure was building. Because the more cars he added, the more people he had to trust. And trust, in the drug world, is a currency that runs out fast. And that would lead to a mistake. A costly one. One that didn't involve drugs or guns or getaway cars, but something far simpler. A single reckless flex. And what that revealed, we'll get to in just a moment. Jamie Oldroyd didn't build an empire alone. What made his operation different wasn't just the weight he was moving, it was how many people he got to carry it for him. At the center there was Oldroyd, never too close to the product but always close to the profit. Around him, a circle of loyal runners, stashmen, and suppliers moved like parts in a machine. Each had a role. Each had a code name. And most of them didn't know what the others were doing. Paul Ferraiolo was one of the flashiest. Known for his links to gangs in Merseyside and his love for fast cars, Paul wasn't subtle. He drove a Ferrari and a Lamborghini like they were taxis. But his real value came from what he could source, kilos at a time, no questions asked. Moses Weber made sure the logistics worked. He was the middleman's middleman, coordinating who picked up, who dropped off, and where. The fewer mistakes, the safer the run. And Moses rarely made mistakes. Lewis Johnson ran the Liverpool Road safe house. On the outside it looked like any rented home. On the inside it was a rotating vault, bricks of cocaine in, cash out. It was under his watch that some of the most important handoffs happened. Callum Vooz stashed drugs at his grandmother's house in Birchwood. A quiet street. A modest home. Not the place you'd expect to hide thousands of pounds in powder, but that was the point. Then there was Joel Reading who brought it to the street. He didn't just move product. He watched who was buying, who was asking questions, who needed to be told to look the other way. And from the car wash in Birchwood, Talent Paja and Islam Grena, two Albanian nationals, moved packages and cleaned cars, sometimes at the same time. It was Grena's phone, in fact, that would later hold the video that blew the lid off everything. But we'll get to that. Outside of Warrington, Oldroyd's reach kept spreading. In Carlisle, Dean English ran the northern line. In Sussex, Ryan Quinnell and Jordan Red kept the southern end moving. Together, this group created a chain that moved silently across the UK, link by link, town by town. They never stayed in one place too long. Cars were swapped. Phones were thrown away. Conversations moved to encrypted apps. No names. No numbers. No patterns. Even their drugs weren't local. Oldroyd sourced his product from Manchester and Liverpool, and moved it outward. London, Darlington, Carlisle, Scunthorpe. The further it traveled, the more money it made. But even with all these layers, one thing never changed. The entire network depended on silence. No one bragged. No one filmed. No one slipped. Until someone did. And what that video exposed would turn the whole operation inside out. While Jamie Oldroyd ran things on the ground, someone else was moving in the shadows. Quieter. Calmer. But just as dangerous. His name was Jamie Simpson, and he didn't look like a kingpin. To his neighbors he ran a bouncy castle business. To his clients he was the guy who set up weekend parties for kids. But behind the inflatables and booking sheets was a different kind of logistics operation. One that didn't deliver balloons but bricks. Simpson didn't flood the streets. He moved the big loads. He didn't need to make calls or count stacks on camera. His job was movement. He was the one who orchestrated the £20 million run from Kent to Warrington, the shipment that would go on to become the biggest land-based cocaine bust in UK history. But even a clean machine needs people to keep it running. And Simpson had his own crew. Claire Smith, his partner, was more than just along for the ride. She handled trips across the country, Scotland, the South, and everywhere in between. Every job? £3,000 in cash. On the surface, she looked like someone heading to visit family. But in the boot? Kilos. Her fiancé, Jamie Winterburn, helped behind the scenes. He didn't touch the packages. But £21,000 in dirty money quietly moved through his account, covering the trail no one else could afford to leave. Then there was Andrew Daniels, the man who drove the van on the day everything fell apart. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He was a guy with a drinking problem. On the return trip from Kent, he cracked open cans of Strongbow in the van carrying nearly 200 kilos of coke. By the time police pulled him out, he had soiled himself. He didn't run. He didn't fight. Because deep down he knew this was the end. And finally Dean Brettle. Not flashy. Not loud. But the one who helped load the hidden compartments. Steel drawers. False floors. His job was to make sure the van passed any quick check without a second glance. Together this crew operated like a clean handoff system. No drama, no attention, just supply and delivery. But even they couldn't stop what was coming. Because what Jamie Simpson didn't know was that his operation, and his freedom, had already been compromised. Not by an undercover cop. Not by a failed run. But by a single clip. A video that didn't even show his face. But would soon seal his fate. August 2, 2018. Just before sunset. Two vehicles moved steadily up the M6 near Knutsford, one playing scout, the other carrying a fortune. Inside the second, beneath a specially designed false floor, sat 186 kilograms of high-purity cocaine, carefully packed and hidden in reinforced drawers. The street value? £20 million. To passing drivers, it was just another van on the motorway. But to Cheshire police, it was the final piece of a puzzle they'd been quietly assembling for over a year. Above the road, a police helicopter tracked every move. On the ground, unmarked units formed a loose net, closing in slowly, methodically. There were no sirens. No shouting. Just a signal. Then, like a trapdoor snapping shut, the road was sealed. The convoy boxed in. And just like that, it was over. No high-speed chase. No shootout. Just calm, surgical precision. When officers cracked open the van, they didn't find a courier in a panic. They found Andrew Daniels, the driver, reeking of cider and fear, too drunk to speak, too far gone to run. He had been drinking Strongbow during the trip, barely holding it together as he drove one of the most valuable illegal shipments in UK history. As investigators pried up the van's floor, they found what they'd been waiting for, block after block of cocaine, stacked, sealed, and ready for distribution. Each brick was a message. And that message was clear. This wasn't street-level crime. This was organized, national, and deeply embedded. The bust made headlines. But what the public didn't know yet was that this wasn't just a lucky catch. It was the culmination of Operation Dreadnot, a 14-month covert investigation built on wiretaps, financial tracing, phone dumps, and human error. Every delivery. Every safehouse. Every courier. And now, with this one move, both Oldroyd's ground crew and Simpson's transport line were exposed in the same breath. But what really broke the case wide open wasn't found in the van. It wasn't the drugs. It wasn't even the driver. It was the video. The one police already had in their hands. The one that turned a quiet case into an undeniable conviction. And what that video revealed about arrogance, money, and the people who thought they were untouchable. We'll get to that next. The drugs never made it home. The £20 million in cocaine was gone in a single night. And when the dust settled, the people holding the bags weren't just couriers or street dealers. It was the suppliers. The men at the top. The ones who didn't get their hands dirty, but always got their cut. Alan and John Tobin weren't flashy. They didn't count cash on camera or flex in sports cars. But make no mistake, these brothers were among the most powerful cocaine suppliers in the UK. Their pipeline moved tons. Not grams. And for years it ran smoothly, quietly, and without warning. Until the M6 bust. That single seizure wiped millions off their books overnight. It wasn't just a drug loss, it was a direct hit to their reputation. Because in their world, losing a shipment that size didn't just look sloppy. It looked weak. Jamie Oldroyd owed the Tobins an estimated £1.5 million, and after the bust he couldn't pay. Which meant someone had to answer for the damage. And someone had to bleed. In a leaked EncroChat message, Alan Tobin sent a chilling text about Oldroyd, coded but clear. He's put me and our kid in this fing hole. I'll owe you the world, bro, carve the sea up. The message wasn't just anger. It was permission. And the person he sent it to? A mystery figure from Manchester. A man with his own score to settle. Someone who didn't just threaten, he followed through. And what followed in the weeks after that message? By the end of summer 2018, Jamie Oldroyd wasn't just a man under investigation. He was a man being hunted. The M6 bust had triggered more than headlines. It opened wounds in the underworld, deep, expensive wounds. £20 million in lost product doesn't go unnoticed. And when someone like Oldroyd is blamed, it doesn't end with a conversation. August 2018. Just weeks after the seizure, gunshots rang out outside a quiet home in Warrington. The target? Oldroyd's parents' house. No warnings. No messages. Just bullets and brick. 3 months later in November the pressure escalated. A petrol bomb was hurled into his brother's sweet shop, a place where families bought snacks, now lit in flames. The blast didn't just destroy property. It sent a message loud enough for the whole town to hear. Someone wanted revenge. Then came the car compound, a storage lot filled with luxury Mercedes linked to Oldroyd's car business. Broken into, smashed, trashed. Every attack added another layer of fear. This wasn't random. This wasn't desperate. This was calculated. And according to police, the entire retaliation campaign was believed to be organized out of Merseyside, the same criminal circles Oldroyd once worked with, the same people he now owed. And when the violence refused to stop, police issued Osman letters, official warnings that someone's life was in immediate danger. Jamie Oldroyd, once surrounded by cash and cars, was now surrounded by enemies. The police were building a case, but his rivals were building something else. And the question wasn't whether they'd catch him. It was whether they'd get to him first. By the time the court dates were announced, the empire was already dead. The cocaine was gone. The gang's faces were splashed across every headline. Their secrets weren't just exposed. They were documented, photographed, itemized, and archived as evidence. One by one the dominoes fell. Jamie Oldroyd, the man who built the flashy front, flaunted the cash, and moved like a streetwise CEO, was sentenced to 14 years and 3 months behind bars. His supplier-turned-problem, Paul Ferraiolo, who once linked him to the Merseyside underworld, got 4.5 years. The Albanians, Paja and Grena, the car wash duo who played delivery men, got 6.5 and 7 years respectively. Police had found a video on Grena's phone of them with Oldroyd. It was never meant to be seen. Lewis Johnson, the quiet safe housekeeper on Liverpool Road, was sentenced to 9 years. Moses Weber, who helped coordinate the drug runs, earned 8 years. Then came the couriers drawn in by the illusion, Jordan Redfern and Elliot Otten, both from middle-class families with no criminal past. Paid between £150 to £500 per trip, they were promised quick money and status. Both got 5 years. The fallout didn't stop there. Claire Smith, who moved drugs cross-country and was supposed to get married just a week after the M6 bust, got 8 years and 9 months. Her fiancé, Jamie Winterburn, had helped launder £21,000 and was sentenced separately. Andrew Daniels, the drunk driver of the doomed van, got 8.5 years. He was pulled out of the vehicle in shame, his clothes soaked, his mind blurred, his name forever attached to the single most expensive drug slip-up in UK land-based history. And Jamie Simpson, the man behind the movement, the one who never shouted, never flashed, never got sloppy, was quietly handed 11.5 years. Altogether, the courts delivered a combined sentence of over 120 years across both gangs. From street runners to regional commanders, every layer of the operation was picked apart and pinned to the wall. What began as a celebration of fast money and control ended in a parade of mugshots, prison numbers, and broken lives. But the true cost of empire wasn't just measured in years or lost profit. It was measured in paranoia, betrayal, and silence. And for those who once ruled the cocaine pipeline from Merseyside to London, it turns out the only thing harder than building a drug empire is surviving it. The van was stopped on the M6 near Knutsford, but the real damage didn't hit there. It rippled hard, wide, and fast through every level of the UK's underworld. Because what came next wasn't just about Jamie Oldroyd or Jamie Simpson. It wasn't even about the 186 kilos of cocaine stuffed under a false floor. It was about who else got caught in the collapse. At the very top of that list? Alan and John Tobin, the elusive brothers who supplied cocaine on an industrial scale, using encrypted apps, armored vehicles, and layers of distance to shield themselves from exposure. 4 years they remained untouchable. But the M6 bust pulled a thread that unraveled everything. Within months, both were arrested, charged, and handed down heavy sentences. Alan Tobin, 28 years. John Tobin, 22 years. The brothers who once dictated the UK's cocaine flow were now just prison numbers. But the fallout didn't end with arrests. In Warrington, a town already balancing between quiet suburbs and organized crime, old tensions began to resurface. The Cullen Gang, another known name in the area, was suddenly back on the radar. The streets had shifted. Alliances cracked. New players eyed the vacuum left behind. Even among police, the case marked something more than a win. It was a moment of reckoning. Detective Chief Inspector Mike Evans, the man who led Operation Dreadnot, summed it up plainly. Cheshire is and always will be a very difficult place to operate for organized crime. He wasn't wrong. Because the operation didn't just dismantle a network. It changed the rules. And left every gang from Liverpool to London wondering, who's watching us now? He had everything. 17 high-end cars. A car hire business that looked clean on paper. cash-counting machines in his kitchen, Rolexes that flashed in Instagram-worthy lighting, couriers at his command, young men risking prison for a few £100 just to be part of the glow. Jamie Alvin, Oldroyd, looked like he'd cracked the code. He played the role perfectly, entrepreneur by day, shadow operator by night. But behind the showroom smiles and staged success was a lie. A lie stacked on debt. A lie fed by desperation. A lie that made him believe he was in control, when he was never even close. Because while he counted cash in private, someone else was counting his mistakes. While he swapped burner phones, someone else was watching his routes. The truth is, he was never the kingpin. He was a cog. A middleman. A pawn in a larger, bloodier machine run by men like the Tobins. Men who didn't need to show off because they already knew who they were. And once that machine started to break down, Alvin wasn't given a second chance. He was offered up. In the end, Alvin wasn't taken down by the police alone. It was the very underworld he fed that came to collect. If this story was valuable to you, don't forget to like and subscribe to Vault Crime for more underworld crime stories like this. See you in our next upload. Tuesday, November 11, 2024. Just after 10 a.m. Birmingham Airport stirred with its usual rhythm. Families reunited at the arrivals gate, business travelers rushed toward taxis, and holiday makers wheeled suitcases across polished floors. On the surface, it was another ordinary morning, a place of journeys and reunions. Yet beneath the hum of routine, the airport itself was preparing to play a far darker role. Birmingham was about to become the silent stage for audacious crimes, where greed and deception moved through the same halls as innocence and expectation. As passengers streamed through security checks and baggage carousels, three very different plots were already in motion. Each would expose how Britain's airports have become more than travel hubs. They are battlegrounds, where international trafficking networks clash with law enforcement, and where one mistake can collapse an empire. By the way, if you have enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to subscribe, like and share this video, as it will encourage us to create more videos on UK organized crime. On the surface, she was every bit the picture of respectability. Farzana Kowsar, a 54-year-old grandmother from Bradford, carried herself like many women of her age, family-oriented, soft-spoken, and seemingly focused on the ordinary responsibilities of daily life. To her neighbors, she was someone who balanced motherhood and grandmotherhood with the quiet dignity that defined countless households across Britain. She blended into the rhythm of her community without question. But beneath that carefully constructed image lay a secret life. Farzana wasn't just a mother or a grandmother. She was the architect of a multi-million-pound drug trafficking pipeline, a woman who had managed to intertwine family loyalty with international crime, transforming her household into a small but tightly organized syndicate. Investigators would later describe her as the linchpin of an operation that moved staggering quantities of cocaine from Mexico to the United Kingdom, right through the halls of Birmingham Airport. What set this case apart from countless other trafficking networks was the depth of personal betrayal woven into it. Unlike typical kingpins who often shield their closest relatives from the dirtier aspects of their trade, Farzana deliberately chose to involve her family at every level. Her children weren't spared. Her daughter-in-law wasn't spared. Even trusted friends of the family were pulled into the conspiracy. For her, blood ties and marriage bonds weren't protection, they were leverage. She understood that loyalty runs deepest in family, and she exploited that devotion to build a smuggling pipeline hidden behind the veneer of family unity. Her eldest son, June Shafak, 33, became her right hand, helping to coordinate the logistics of travel and oversee operational details. Then came Mohammed Amir Shafak, 28, who acted as a courier, collecting and transporting the bags that contained their fortunes. Younger members of the family were also drawn in, Ume Mohammed, 22, and even Hamza Shafak, who was just 17 years old when the operation was active. Involving someone barely out of his teenage years underscored the recklessness of Farzana's choices. She was willing to gamble with the futures of her own children for the promise of illicit wealth. The betrayal didn't stop there. Sarah Hussein, her daughter-in-law, was absorbed into the plan, asked not to stand aside but to participate. Instead of being protected from danger, she was made part of it. Then there was Safaner, just 19 at the time, another of the youngest caught in the web. Finally, even a close family associate, Khalid Abdul Qawi, 36, was roped in. What emerged was not a loose arrangement of occasional helpers, but a structured hierarchy with Farzana at its peak. She called the shots, designed the strategies, and ensured that her family's loyalty would double as her workforce. Her betrayal wasn't just criminal, it was maternal. The brilliance, and the darkness of the Courier operation was in its simplicity. To outsiders, their movements looked like nothing more than short family holidays. Trips were booked to familiar European destinations, Dublin, Amsterdam, or other short-haul cities that didn't raise suspicion. The travelers carried light luggage, sometimes no checked bags at all. But there was a hidden logic behind the bookings. Their return flights weren't random. They were carefully timed to coincide with arrivals from Cancun, Mexico. Mexico wasn't just a vacation hotspot. It was the origin point of the cocaine pipeline. Through corrupt contacts overseas, shadowy figures who coordinated shipments and ensured the bags made it to the right flights, preloaded suitcases packed with cocaine were checked onto flights bound for Birmingham. The family's role was deceptively simple: intercept. When their short-haul flights landed, the family blended seamlessly with crowds in the baggage hall. As passengers from both flights merged near the carousels, Farzana's couriers would position themselves by the belts unloading luggage from Cancun. All they had to do was lift the unaccompanied bags off the belt, pretend they were theirs, and walk casually out into the arrivals hall. There were no hidden compartments. No elaborate concealment devices. The cocaine wasn't tucked into secret linings or disguised as legitimate goods. The brilliance of the plan was its banality. Who questions a traveler lifting a bag from a carousel, especially when they already look like they've just arrived from a weekend in Dublin? It was a choreography of normality. Casual clothes, calm demeanors, quiet efficiency. If anyone looked twice, the group appeared no different from holiday makers retrieving luggage after a short trip. That illusion was everything. To succeed, the family had to blend into the background, to move like shadows hidden in plain sight. Their calm behavior was their greatest weapon. No nervous gestures, no suspicious glances, no frantic movements. Each smuggling run relied on the same formula. And for a time it worked. From August to November 2024, investigators believe the family pulled off at least 5 successful operations, moving drugs with near-military precision. Every journey strengthened Farzana's belief that her system was foolproof, that the ordinary mask of family travel would continue to protect her. But while they perfected the art of deception, they failed to account for the one constant variable: surveillance. By early November, the National Crime Agency, NCA, had been monitoring the group closely. Patterns had emerged: unexplained short trips, suspiciously timed returns, and familiar faces lingering near baggage belts. Quietly, investigators gathered intelligence, built a timeline, and prepared for the moment to strike. Before we continue, don't forget that what you are watching took us hours of both research, editing, and voicing to able to get it across to you. We plead that you show us your support by just subscribing to this channel and liking this video, as it will encourage us to create more video like this. Thank you. That moment arrived on Tuesday, November 11, 2024. As the long-haul flight from Cancun touched down, Farzana's couriers slipped into position. CCTV footage would later show them standing calmly among other travelers, their eyes fixed on the carousel where the cocaine-loaded bags would appear. 6 suitcases in total. Each one packed with blocks of cocaine. Each one a fortune. The couriers lifted the bags effortlessly, loading them onto trolleys, moving toward the terminal exits. On camera they appeared calm, almost too calm, wheeling their haul out into the open, just like any family returning from a holiday. But outside, officers were waiting. In the car park, just as the group began loading the luggage into waiting vehicles, the quiet patience of weeks of investigation exploded into action. NCA teams moved in, surrounding the suspects in a coordinated strike. Within moments, 6 individuals were in custody, and all 6 suitcases were seized before leaving the airport grounds. When the suitcases were opened, the scale of the operation finally came into focus. Inside was an astonishing 180 kilograms of high-purity cocaine. Experts estimated its wholesale value at £5 million, with a street value soaring above £14 million once broken down for distribution. Photographs released later by the Crown Prosecution Service showed neatly wrapped bricks of cocaine stacked like building blocks of the empire Farzana had been constructing. To the family, it was meant to be their fortune. To the investigators, it was the final proof of a conspiracy that had twisted family loyalty into criminal enterprise. For years, Birmingham Airport had served as a silent accomplice to the family's deception. The blending of ordinary travel with criminal purpose had fooled countless travelers, perhaps even airport staff. But on that November morning, the illusion collapsed. What had looked like just another family trip became the dismantling of an empire. A grandmother once trusted by her community was exposed as the ringleader of a cross-continental network. Her children, once seen as ordinary young adults building futures, were revealed as pawns in their mother's dangerous game. And Birmingham Airport, once again, proved itself not only a gateway for travelers but a battlefield where organized crime and law enforcement collide. While Farzana Syndicate represented the careful orchestration of family loyalty turned criminal, not all drug busts at Birmingham Airport involved such sophistication. Sometimes it was a single careless mistake, a dealer undone not by precision surveillance but by his own arrogance. Airports are often seen as fortresses of security. Every bag scanned, every passenger checked, every movement monitored. Yet for many seasoned traffickers, arrogance convinces them that these checks are just another obstacle to walk past. In February 2016, one such man stood at Birmingham Airport's departure gate. Majid Hussein, a local drug dealer whose reputation in the city's underworld carried weight. To those who knew him, Hussein was no small-time courier. He was a man who had already built a name and an empire in Birmingham's drug trade. Yet on this day he was reduced to a single passenger standing in line like everyone else, holding a bag that would expose the true extent of his criminal life. Hussein wasn't a novice. He had moved drugs before. He had money, contacts, and the kind of influence that comes with running a thriving criminal business. Yet, on that February day he made a mistake so simple that investigators would later struggle to understand how a man of his experience could be so careless. Inside his hand luggage, packed without disguise, without concealment, was a single wrap of heroin. Not tucked into a hidden lining, not disguised in toiletries or clothing, but sitting inside his carry-on as though it were nothing more than an afterthought. When security officers performed a routine inspection, the discovery was immediate. The heroin was seized and Hussein was detained on the spot. In that moment his confidence collapsed into panic. What seemed like a minor find, a wrap of heroin in hand luggage, was enough to trigger the suspicion of experienced officers. To them it didn't look like the casual possession of a user. It looked like the sloppiness of a man who had grown arrogant in his trade. What began at the airport was just the first crack. Within hours of Hussein's detention, investigators secured warrants to search his home address on Nansen Road in Salt Lake, Birmingham. If the airport arrest was a stumble, the home raid was a complete collapse. When officers entered Hussein's property, they were confronted with the reality of who he truly was. This wasn't a man dabbling at the edges of crime, it was a dealer at the heart of a toxic operation. The first shock came in Hussein's own bedroom. Beneath his bed, officers uncovered a suitcase packed not with clothing or personal effects, but with 1 kilogram of heroin and 4 kilograms of cocaine. The street value of these drugs alone was estimated at £250,000, a figure that confirmed Hussein was far from a small player. But the drugs were only the beginning. Hidden in the property was an arsenal of weapons. Among them, a semi-automatic handgun, fully capable of lethal use, was discovered alongside 27 rounds of live ammunition. This was no casual weapon kept for protection. It was the kind of firepower associated with gangs ready to defend territory or enforce debts with violence. Even more disturbing was a stun gun cleverly disguised as a mobile phone. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary piece of technology, but in reality, it was a concealed weapon designed to incapacitate unsuspecting victims. Its very design spoke to deception, a willingness to mask violence behind everyday objects. Officers also seized an air pistol, another reminder of Hussein's preparedness to intimidate or injure. Then came the final revelation, the profits of his trade. Hidden away in the property was £300,000 in cash, bundled into stacks of banknotes. Each bundle was a silent testament to the scale of his dealings, to the countless transactions that had turned addiction and suffering into wealth. Together, the drugs, the weapons, and the cash painted a chilling picture. This wasn't just a dealer making a mistake at an airport. This was a man deeply embedded in a network of crime, living at the intersection of narcotics and violence. When Hussein's case reached Birmingham Crown Court in August 2016, the prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece. The drugs, the firearms, the ammunition, the cash, it was overwhelming. Hussein, perhaps realizing there was no way out, chose to plead guilty on the opening day of his trial. The charges he admitted to were extensive. Possession of a prohibited firearm. Possession of a disguised firearm. Possession of ammunition. Possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply. Possession of criminal property. The admissions confirmed what investigators had suspected from the start. The wrap of heroin at the airport was never the full story. It was only the loose thread that, when pulled, unraveled an empire. During sentencing, Judge Patrick Thomas QC offered a sharp assessment of what Hussein represented. He described the combination of drugs and firearms as a toxic mixture, one that posed a direct danger to the wider public. The message was clear. A man who could stockpile narcotics while keeping lethal weapons at hand was not simply a dealer, but a threat to the community. Hussein was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But even behind bars, his punishment wasn't finished. Under the Proceeds of Crime Act, prosecutors pushed to reclaim the wealth he had accumulated through illegal activity. In December 2017, the court ruled that Hussein had benefited by hundreds of thousands of pounds from his empire. He was ordered to repay £295,000 within 3 months or face an additional 3 years on top of his 12-year sentence. A further £33,000 in criminal benefit remained outstanding, to be reclaimed once more assets were identified. For investigators, Hussein's downfall was as fascinating as it was frustrating. This was a man with the discipline to build an operation that moved significant quantities of Class A drugs, with enough money to stockpile hundreds of thousands in cash, and with the ruthlessness to keep firearms ready in his bedroom. Yet he was undone not by an elaborate sting, not by a confidential informant, but by his own arrogance. He walked into Birmingham Airport with heroin casually packed in his hand luggage, as if his reputation and his confidence could carry him through security. It was a miscalculation that destroyed everything. Majid Hussein's empire didn't collapse because of police ingenuity alone. It collapsed because he underestimated the smallest detail. His downfall serves as a reminder that in the world of organized crime, it isn't always the complex plans that fail. Sometimes, it's the simplest oversight, the kind that makes an empire look untouchable one day and leaves it in ruins the next. For all his weapons, wealth, and influence, it was a single wrap of heroin that cracked open the empire of a Birmingham drug dealer and left him behind bars, stripped of his fortune and remembered not for his power but for his carelessness. By late 2021, Birmingham Airport had already seen its share of trafficking plots unravel. Some were dismantled by weeks of surveillance, others by careless mistakes. But the story of Mohammed Azhar Rashid, a 35-year-old man from Oldham in Greater Manchester, showed yet another truth. Even calmness and composure are no guarantees of success when you're carrying a fortune in narcotics. It was November 2021, and Rashid had just landed on a flight from Sialkot, Pakistan via Dubai. To the untrained eye, he was nothing more than another weary traveler stepping off a long-haul flight. His movements were smooth, his demeanor composed. CCTV footage later released by investigators showed Rashid wheeling his luggage with the steady rhythm of a man entirely at ease. He didn't fidget. He didn't glance nervously around the hall. He didn't break stride. If body language is often the first tell of a nervous courier, Rashid appeared to have mastered the art of stillness. Inside his suitcase, however, was a consignment that could never pass unnoticed: 18 kilograms of heroin, tightly wrapped and carefully concealed, destined for the streets of Britain. Unlike some smugglers who try to slip through security with false bottoms and suitcases or elaborate concealment tricks, Rashid's method was far less complicated. He carried the drugs directly in his checked luggage, counting on one thing to get him through: confidence. He seemed to believe that if he behaved like any ordinary passenger, customs officials would have no reason to look twice. And in fairness, his performance was convincing. To the average traveler passing by, Rashid was invisible, just another man pushing his bags toward the exit. But what he didn't realize was that border force officers had already singled him out. His name, his route, and his movements raised quiet red flags. And his calm exterior, far from erasing suspicion, only deepened it. Rashid was directed to a secondary search area. Officers began inspecting his baggage, lifting out clothing and personal effects until they reached the carefully wrapped packages buried within. What they uncovered was staggering: 18 kilograms of heroin of exceptionally high purity. Forensic analysis would later confirm purity levels between 66% and 71%, a level rarely seen by the time narcotics reach street circulation. In practical terms, it meant the consignment was worth an estimated £900,000. A figure that could multiply several times over once the heroin was cut and sold at street level. The calmness that had carried Rashid this far was shattered in an instant. The illusion of normality crumbled when confronted with the undeniable evidence now spread across the inspection table. For investigators, the drugs were already enough to secure charges. But the real insight into Rashid's role came from his mobile phone. Hidden among ordinary contacts and apps were WhatsApp messages that exposed the mechanics of the smuggling network. Rashid hadn't been acting alone. He was in constant communication with a handler in Pakistan, referred to simply as brother. The messages revealed a chilling level of control. As Rashid moved through each stage of his journey, Brother offered instructions and reassurance, monitoring him almost like a puppet master pulling strings. One message in particular stood out to investigators. Just as Rashid approached airport security, his anxiety apparently rising, Brother sent him a line meant to soothe. Remain tension-free. God will be generous. The words, simple and spiritual on the surface, carried a darker weight in context. It was reassurance designed to steady Rashid's nerves, a reminder that he was just one cog in a far larger machine. To investigators, it was proof that Rashid was not a lone smuggler but a courier in a professional network that spanned continents. The phone evidence made one fact unmistakable: Rashid was not the mastermind. He was not the financier. He was not the handler. He was the courier, the one chosen to carry the risk while others remained safely offshore. This is the reality of international trafficking. Networks recruit men like Rashid with promises of money or pressure disguised as opportunity. They are given flights, instructions, sometimes even spiritual comfort, but in truth they are disposable. If caught, the organization simply finds another courier, another suitcase, another route. Rashid's calm demeanor may have fooled casual observers, but it did nothing to protect him from the inevitability of his role. His fate had been sealed the moment he agreed to carry those 18 kilograms. By May 2022, Rashid stood before Birmingham Crown Court. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The drugs in his luggage, the forensic confirmation of purity, the WhatsApp messages tying him to a handler abroad. There was no plausible denial. Faced with the inevitable, Rashid entered a guilty plea to the importation of Class A drugs. His calm composure in the airport gave way to the quiet resignation of a man who knew the weight of the law was bearing down on him. The sentence: 9 years in prison. For some, it may have seemed lenient compared to the value of the drugs involved, but the message was unmistakable. Rashid's attempt to mask a fortune in narcotics with nothing more than calm confidence had failed, and he would now spend nearly a decade behind bars. The story of Mohammed Azayar Rashid is a stark reminder that confidence isn't enough to beat the system. He carried himself with the poise of a man who believed he could walk through customs unnoticed, but composure cannot erase the red flags of intelligence-led policing. For investigators, his case also underscored a wider truth: couriers like Rashid are not unique. They are interchangeable links in an international chain, recruited, reassured, and discarded when caught. His calmness didn't save him. His loyalty to his handler didn't protect him. In the end, Rashid was just another disposable piece in a network far larger than himself. At Birmingham Airport, his story joined the growing list of cautionary tales. A reminder that no matter how convincing the performance, the system eventually sees through the mask. When the dust finally settled, the spectacle of Birmingham Airport's November 2024 sting gave way to the cold weight of courtroom justice. For Farzana Kauser and her family, the masks of ordinary life had been stripped away. No longer were they travelers blending into the bustle of arrivals. They were defendants standing before a judge, their futures balanced on the evidence laid bare against them. At the heart of the case was Farzana Kauser, the grandmother-turned-mastermind whose betrayal of family bonds had formed the backbone of the operation. The court described her as the linchpin, the strategist who had weaponized family loyalty to build an international pipeline of cocaine. Her sentence reflected the scale of her role: 13 years and 4 months in prison. A punishment that underscored the damage she had caused not only to her community, but to her own bloodline. Her children, once drawn in under her authority, faced their own reckoning. June Shafak, 33, who acted as her lieutenant, received 10 years and 9 months. Muhammad Amir Shafak, 28, entrusted as a courier, was handed 8 years and 9 months. Ume Muhammad, 22, another courier caught in the machinery of the plot, received 8 years and 1 month. Hamza Shafak, the youngest at just 17 when the smuggling runs took place, was dealt with separately as a youth. By the time of trial he had turned 18, and though his fate was postponed until October 2025, it was already clear that his life path had been altered irreversibly. Even those at the periphery of the family were not spared. Safaner, just 19 years old, received 7 years and 2 months, her youth unable to shield her from the severity of the conspiracy. Sarah Hussein, 27, the daughter-in-law, was given a 2-year sentence, suspended for 2 years, narrowly escaping prison but marked forever by her involvement. And the lone outsider, Khaled Abdul Kawi, 36, a trusted friend pulled into the orbit of the Kauser family, was sentenced to 10 years and 9 months. One by one the names were called, the sentences read, and the empire crumbled into fragments. What had once been presented to the community as a tightly knit family was revealed instead as a criminal syndicate, shattered by greed, loyalty twisted into chains, and a mother who had gambled with the futures of her children. The story of the Bradford family was more than a headline about drug trafficking. It was a cautionary tale of generational damage. Farzana's choices didn't just bring cocaine into Britain. They pulled teenagers into crime, handed them criminal records before adulthood, and robbed them of futures that might have been lived in education, careers, or family life. The irony was stark. A mother whose role is meant to nurture and protect, had instead sacrificed her own children on the altar of international crime. The bonds of trust that should have anchored her family became the very tools she used to expand her empire. When placed alongside the other cases at Birmingham Airport, a pattern emerges. Farzana Kowsar's family plot revealed the devastation caused when loyalty is weaponized, when a parent recruits their children not into safety but into danger. Majid Hussein's downfall demonstrated the fatal consequences of arrogance, how a single careless rap of heroin exposed an entire empire of drugs, weapons, and cash. Mohammad Azayar Rashid's calm smuggle showed the futility of confidence, how even the smoothest performance cannot erase the fact that couriers are disposable, managed from afar and discarded when caught. Together, these stories strip away the myths of organized crime. They show that no matter how carefully orchestrated, no matter how powerful the empire, and no matter how calm the courier, the collapse is inevitable. Airports are more than transit points. They are mirrors reflecting the ingenuity of organized crime and the determination of law enforcement. Every carousel, every customs check, every boarding gate becomes a crossroads where greed meets vigilance, and where fortunes are either smuggled in or seized before they leave the ground. At Birmingham Airport, these three stories collided not just by coincidence, but by inevitability. Because where networks gamble with audacity, investigators wait with patience. And sooner or later the mask always slips. These stories are reminders that behind every flight and every suitcase, investigators are watching. Which of these three cases shocked you the most? The mother who sacrificed her children, the dealer undone by arrogance, or the courier fooled by false promises? Let us know in the comments. If you found this breakdown compelling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next case. This has been Vault Sime, where we uncover the hidden battles fought at Britain's airports. On a cold morning in February 2020, a silver taxi rolled onto the A52 outside Derby. No sirens. No speeding. Just two brothers up front, quiet, almost bored. In the trunk, holdalls zipped shut. To anyone watching, it looked like the most routine drive in Britain. But inside those bags were 7 kilos of pure cocaine, just a slice of what had already pumped through the veins of a £165 million network. At the center of it all was Paldip Monger. No criminal record. No flashy profile. Just a quiet man in a plain terraced house who told neighbors he worked in logistics. And in a way he did. Except his supply chain didn't move parcels, it moved bricks. Kilos from Dubai, routed across the UK like freight. No guns. No turf wars. Just cold precision. But on that day the silence broke. So how did a man with no street reputation build one of the UK's most invisible drug empires? And what was the one message that brought the entire machine crashing down? This is the story of the courier system no one saw coming, and the encrypted whisper that exposed it all. Monger didn't look like a kingpin. No jewelry. No vacations. He grew up far from glamour. A man more familiar with spreadsheets than street fights, he understood scale, not risk. Formerly described by those who knew him as calculated and obsessively neat, Monger treated drug trafficking like logistics management. And in his mind he was just running product. Fast, clean, efficient. Just a 45-year-old living on Willow Close, running a supply chain more disciplined than most Fortune 500s. His job was simple: order bulk cocaine from contacts in Dubai. It came in bricks, not grams. Kilos at a time. He was tied directly into a Dubai-based supply chain, leading members, including Monger himself, to meet a contact so reliable they bragged about being on a mil a week in shipments. These weren't casual meetings. They coordinated bulk purchases, sometimes around 100 kilograms at a time, organized transport routes and scheduled logistics down to the hour. The supply line was built not for risky one-off drops, but for consistent high-volume movement that could sustain the demand of Britain's wholesale cocaine market. Dubai wasn't just a meeting spot, it was the front end of an industrial-grade trafficking network. Cocaine was stored there, laundered through coded networks, and moved across borders into the UK. What made the connection so dangerous was how clean it looked. The Dubai link gave the operation a sense of distance and deniability. Monger wasn't just a local dealer. He was now plugged into a global stream of supply, with financial flows and encrypted channels tying everything together. That foreign connection made the gang rich. But it also left fingerprints, footprints even, for investigators watching from afar. He used encrypted phones running on EncroChat to speak freely, believing the network was beyond reach. But as we'll see later, that illusion of safety would turn into the very crack that shattered everything. To understand how this quiet man could funnel over 100 kilograms of cocaine into the UK without drawing attention, you have to understand who moved it, and how they never made a sound. That job fell to Kajla. He was 41 from Coventry and didn't need weapons or threats. Before the operation, Kajla worked in distribution, handling delivery schedules and fleet coordination for a local firm. It was experience that translated directly to drug logistics. He wasn't flashy, but he was punctual. A stickler for timing and routine, he treated every courier like a cog in a larger machine. He used plants. Kajla designed the entire logistics network. From pickups to drop-offs, every movement of product and cash was timed, mapped, and rehearsed. This wasn't the kind of crew that left things to chance. Couriers were trained like service agents. They had specific scripts, distances, and timings. No two runs were identical, yet none were improvised. Petrol stations, backstreets, side doors of legit-looking properties, everything was designed to look boring. And that was the point. Kajla also collected the money, handed over in holdalls and street corners. He moved it quietly through cabs and rentals. Every pound had a destination. Every delay had a protocol. And behind all of it was the belief that order would keep them invisible. But order doesn't just move product. It has to be tracked. That brings us to the man who logged every penny, every pound, and every payout. Meet Manraj Johal. 32 years old. Lived in Luton. Didn't touch the drugs. Didn't ride with the couriers. His world was numbers. He kept Excel spreadsheets like a corporate accountant, logging everything the gang brought in. He knew who owed what had been sold, and which batch had already paid off. Johal didn't hide behind vague records. He tracked everything in plain figures. No aliases. No fake invoices. Just trust and clean documentation. He even reported updates directly to Dubai-based suppliers through another encrypted phone. His cousin Nimrat Bahia helped bundle the money. When police raided a London apartment, Bahia was caught mid-count with £530,000 laid out, sorted, and labeled. It looked less like a gang operation and more like a financial firm in full swing. But while the cash was being counted and logged, someone had to keep the entire flow moving in Derby, the gang's other major hub. And that's where Manveer Singh stepped in. Singh, also known as Manveer Kak, ran what they called the Derby office. He didn't oversee street-level sales or rough up clients. His role was central to the gang's efficiency. Bundle the cash, assign token numbers, and make sure it got where it needed to go. Each bundle had its own ID, a tag that connected it to a sale, a courier, a timeline. This wasn't just about collecting money. It was about tracing its flow and never losing sight of a single pound. These offices weren't chaotic dens. Police later described them as business-grade facilities. Residential flats acting as banks. Some holding between £1 million and £2 million in one go. Quiet buildings with loud secrets. And yet, for over a year it all worked. Their routes ran through council flats, lockups, and car parks under the cover of night. Holdalls of cash and bricks of cocaine passed through cabs, like the Iqbal brothers' derby-plated taxi that cruised motorways without sirens or flashing lights. To anyone watching, it was just an evening run. But it wasn't. It was a courier system disguised in plain sight. There were no rap videos, no turf wars, just clean rolls, token codes, and routines so ordinary they looked legitimate. For 408 days, it operated without a single leak. Until a message sent in confidence through EncroChat was intercepted. And the system built on silence began to scream. The EncroChat system was meant to be unbreakable. A secure messaging platform used by criminals across the world. No names. No risks. Just encrypted words and total confidence. But European law enforcement had infiltrated it. Quietly. Carefully. And every message the gang sent, every address, every bundle, every shipment, was logged and passed to UK authorities. It started as a whisper. One intercepted message referenced a drop in Derby. Police followed the trail, cross-referencing it with real-world surveillance. Then came the second clue, a photo shared over EncroChat that revealed the interior of a property. Police matched the curtains to a house already on their radar. Even before EncroChat gave investigators a front-row seat to the gang's operation, something about them was already raising flags. The East Midlands Special Operations Unit, tasked with monitoring high-level organized crime, had long kept eyes on Derby and Coventry due to a spike in suspected Class A trafficking routes. Monger and his associates weren't exactly invisible. There were patterns: couriers driving rentals on repeat routes, unaccounted for cash exchanges in quiet zones, and addresses that came up again and again in surveillance sweeps. Add to that whispers from street-level informants about bulk movement and unusually professional coordination, and the pieces were slowly falling into view. They also noticed something else. The same names were surfacing around vehicle rentals, petrol station meetups, and residential flats, acting more like processing hubs than homes. These weren't definitive clues, but they were enough to draw law enforcement into a deeper look. And then came the global context. European law enforcement had been zeroing in on encrypted criminal networks. EncroChat was on their radar, and anyone heavily reliant on it became suspect by association. So when the Derby house popped up in connection to an EncroChat message, it wasn't new to them. They were already watching. In April 2020, police intercepted a 7-kilogram shipment of cocaine in Derby. It matched messages from EncroChat exactly. Days later, they raided Basharat Iqbal's house. Inside, 20,000 pounds in cash and 3 kilograms of cocaine hidden in a wardrobe. The EncroChat breach turned a black box into a window. One message included a snapshot taken inside a house, just an ordinary image. But in the corner sat a dog. That same dog was later found during a Derby raid, confirming the location. Another message listed coordinates that matched a previously identified drop zone. And one Careless photo showed curtain patterns, which police matched to a known property already under quiet observation. Even the spreadsheets that gang members sent over these phones, down to the penny, became evidence. Messages weren't coded. Buyers, weights, delivery times, all detailed plainly. The silence they counted on became a confession whispered across a secure line now wide open. Investigators could now see inside the entire operation. Orders, buyers, routes, even personal conversations. And then everything accelerated. Targets were flagged. Properties identified. Timelines confirmed. From one message, investigators built a map. From that map, they built a case. Raids followed fast. A London apartment gave up more than £500,000 in cash. The buyer network that kept the engine fed. The gang didn't deal in grams, they dealt in bulk. And their buyers weren't street hustlers. They were regional wholesalers moving kilos at a time. One of the most prolific was Michael Kareem, based in Nottingham. He was more than a customer, he was a distributor in his own right. Over the course of the operation, police believe he sourced at least 9 kilos from the network. The money didn't stay quiet. Kareem splurged on 46 luxury cars, 2 high-end apartments, designer fashion, and international travel. He spent over £91,000 just on rental flats. The rest went into lavish trips to Vegas and football matches across Europe. Other buyers kept lower profiles, but their orders were no less significant. Joseph Davidson, Kelly Williamson, Mohammed Shafi, and Narinder Palahat each placed kilo-level orders and distributed downstream into their respective zones. They weren't part of a formal hierarchy, but each knew their role: buy clean, move fast, and never ask where the supply came from. They didn't need to understand the whole system. They just needed it to keep running. And for over a year, that's exactly what it did. Tensions were rising. Back in Derby, officers found couriers mid-run. There was no chaos, no violence. Just takedowns by the book. One by one, the gang's layers collapsed. From the top-level buyers to the low-key drivers. Every encrypted word they sent became evidence. By the end, it wasn't just a bust. It was a dismantling. One courier was stopped with 7 kilos of cocaine in his bag, the exact weight and packaging shown in a photo sent just hours earlier. Another raid yielded 20,000 pounds in a locked tin and 3 kilos stuffed in a wardrobe. In Luton, officers breached a flat mid-count, with bundles of cash still in hand. There were no escapes. No final messages sent. Just arrests, quiet, methodical, and final. And when the court sessions opened in 2022, the scale of what had been built and destroyed was laid bare. The courtroom in Derby Crown Court was packed. 4 separate trials. Dozens of charges. Prosecutors laid it out clearly: a cocaine distribution operation that ran like an industrial supply chain. The numbers stunned even seasoned officials. Between mid-March and April 2020 alone, The gang pulled in £18.6 million. How did they do it? That 45-day stretch wasn't some lucky window. It was a perfect storm of supply, demand, and cold-blooded coordination. At the top, Monger had secured a reliable stream of high-purity cocaine from Dubai. And through Careless's meticulous logistics network, product was hitting the ground in Britain on a near-daily schedule. During that time, Careless ramped up courier runs, reducing delays and downtime between drops. His routes became tighter, more efficient. Couriers were sometimes running multiple deliveries per day, blending into rush-hour traffic and city noise like ordinary workers. Meanwhile, Singh and the Derby office operated like a round-the-clock distribution hub. Money came in and was bundled almost as fast as the product moved out. They'd shifted their operation into overdrive. And Johal? He logged every pound. His spreadsheets, later recovered, showed that large-scale buyers, wholesalers themselves, were placing repeat orders within days. These weren't street deals. They were bulk transactions. Kilo after kilo at £40,000 a unit or more. On some days, police believe the gang cleared over £500,000. No missed payments. No breaks in movement. Just cocaine in, money out. The system worked like a freight engine with no brakes. And for those 6 weeks it was running full speed. That's more than £400,000 per day. Paldip Monger was sentenced to 18 years and 3 months. Kajla 15 years and 3 months. Johal 15 years and 8 months. Singh 13 years. Nimrat Bahia, caught mid-bundling, received 7 years and 1 month. The rest of the gang, from buyers to couriers, added up to 167 years total. But it didn't end in court. Authorities moved to seize the assets next. Under the Proceeds of Crime Act, homes, cars, and hidden cash were now targets. Every pound earned through the system was fair game. What began as quiet streets in Derby turned into one of the largest cocaine operations in British history. All because a network trusted too much in silence. They believed they were invisible. That no one could see them. That no one could hear them. But in the end, it wasn't a rival crew or street violence that took them down. It was the very system they thought kept them safe.